Hello and welcome to Son of a Glitch. Join us as we explore some of the internet's craziest glitch stories. Story 1. 6 or 7 years ago, maybe 8, I was working a job a couple towns over, which meant my commute was long, bleak, and mostly thankless. Why travel so far? Because they were hiring, and it was the only job that made use of my degree. It paid more than stocking shelves at Sam's Club, which I'd done before. Side note, screw Sam's Club and everything about it. Soul-sucking work in management with the emotional intelligence of a cheese grater. Anyway, once I got off the highway, the rest of my drive was pure hell. School zones stacked like angry dominoes. If I left even 10 minutes too late, my 45-minute drive became a 90-minute crawl through blinking lights and crossing guards who looked like they'd murder you for sneezing. To avoid that, I'd leave at an ungodly hour. We're talking before the sun even thought about rising. The streets would be empty. Dead. Just the way I liked it. This morning, the one that burned itself into my skull, started like any other. No sun. No people. Just the slow, steady hum of my old-ass car. I just exited the highway and hit a red light. This intersection was a ghost town. No cars. No pedestrians. Just wind and flickering streetlights that gave off the kind of light that made you feel like you were in a horror movie. The kind where the protagonist dies in the first 10 minutes. I wasn't listening to music. The cassette adapter I used for my phone was fritzing out. Surprise, surprise. So I just sat there in silence, the kind that feels heavy, like it's pressing into your eardrums. My car idled. The red light glared. I stared through the windshield blank. And then the light turned green. I looked right. Nothing. I looked left. Nothing. I looked ahead, still not moving. My foot stayed on the brake like it had a mind of its own. I didn't feel scared. Not yet. Just weirdly still. Like something had wrapped icy fingers around my chest and whispered, wait. And then, I don't remember if I said this out loud or just thought it, but I remember the words clearly. I wonder why I'm not driving. Right then, like the universe had been waiting for its cue, a muscle car tore through the red light from my left, roaring past like a goddamn demon. Tires screamed against the pavement, its headlights flaring as it rocketed past and disappeared into the dark. It was going at least 80, maybe more. If I'd gone when the light told me to, he would have T-boned me straight into the afterlife. I just sat there for a second, heart thumping, eyes wide. Then again, maybe just in my head, maybe not, I said, "Ah, that's why." I drove on, slow, cautious. Like an old man. Because cars are expensive, and I don't have money for a new spine. Sue me. I counted the seconds it would have taken me to reach the center of that intersection. The moment the light turned, the time it took to check my surroundings, and then accelerate. It matched exactly, to the second, with when the muscle car screamed through. Later, at work, it hit me like a second near miss. I would have died. Or worse, survived and racked up so much medical debt, I'd have to sell organs on the dark web just to afford Advil. People lie on the internet all the time. I know that. But this happened. Believe me or don't. I don't really care. Just drive safe. Story 2. It was a cold morning, not the kind that bites, but the kind that clings. I was walking down the sidewalk, breathing fog, my hands shoved deep in my coat pockets. The street was still waking up. Apartment windows flickered with soft yellow light, and the sound of distant buses rumbled like a city's yawn. No doorways. No alleys. Just a long, fenced-in stretch. The kind of street that feels like it has nowhere to hide. That's when I saw her. She was walking toward me on the same side of the sidewalk, maybe 20 yards ahead. A woman or girl, I couldn't quite tell, with an orange scarf wrapped around her head like a flame. It was the only real color on that street. Everything else was a dull gray, the sidewalk, the fences, the sky. But that scarf burned bright. We were walking straight toward each other. I looked down for a second to avoid being awkward. You know, the usual don't make it weird glance at your shoes. And when I looked up again, she was moving behind a tree. It was a big tree, sure, but not big enough to hide someone completely. Especially not someone walking directly at me with no buildings, no parked cars, no nothing to duck into. She should have reappeared on the other side of the trunk within a second or two. But she didn't. I blinked. Slowed down. The street was empty. The orange scarf gone. No footfalls. No rustling fabric. Nothing. My first thought, maybe she'd crossed the street when I wasn't paying attention. So I turned my head slowly, like I was afraid of what I wouldn't see, and scanned the opposite sidewalk. Just a couple of kids waiting for the bus, their backpacks slumped like tired turtles. No orange scarf. No sign of her. I turned around. Maybe she passed me somehow. Nope. The sidewalk behind me was just as barren. I'd been walking toward the inside of the sidewalk, closest to the fences, so if she'd entered a building or yard, she'd have had to cross in front of me. I would have seen her, would have heard her, but there were no entrances, no gates, just cold metal fence stretching for half a block in both directions. No brakes, no doors, no places to slip through, nothing. And that scarf, it wasn't subtle. It was loud, riotous. You don't just lose track of something like that. At the time, I brushed it off. I had somewhere to be, and being late because a woman in an orange scarf blinked out of existence didn't seem like a great excuse. I just shrugged and moved on. But now, thinking about it years later, it's like my memory has sharpened instead of fading. I remember the exact moment she disappeared. The way her scarf moved in the wind. The way my steps slowed. The way I stopped breathing for a second, afraid to even move. It was like reality hiccuped. Like I saw a frame of a film that wasn't meant to be there, and then the next frame had been edited, cut, spliced with something else. I don't know what I saw. I don't know if she was ever really there, or if I caught a glimpse of something I wasn't supposed to. But I do know this, she vanished. And there was nowhere for her to go. Story 3. I don't live in the best environment. There is a pretty bad mice problem, and I've been struggling dealing with them. Today I carefully cleaned my shelf that had all my books and old birthday cards in it. There was a lot of droppings. Needless to say, it smelled pretty awful. While cleaning the shelf, I was looking through the old cards I had, and out of nowhere I got the whiff of something. It smelled almost fruity yet like cologne, but I couldn't place where it was coming from. Whatever, right? So I finished cleaning everything, and went into the bathroom to wash my hands real quick with the first available soap, which was a conditioner for the shower cause I was out of hand soap for the moment. Not the most sanitary I know, but I got some hand soap after. And lo and behold, it was the same exact smell. So I went back to the cards and I couldn't find the smell again. Pretty weird occurrence. For context, I don't use that conditioner, I have my own. And no one was around when I smelled it. I'm sure it can be chalked up to the brain being weird, but I thought it was interesting. Story 4. Okay. I've only heard of glitch in the Matrix stories from YouTube videos that read posts off Reddit. I never really fully believed them, but I always wondered what it would feel like if something like that was real. Well, I think it just happened to me. I was coming back home after a picnic with my friends. I hadn't slept much the night before and was planning to cancel, honestly, but I always do that, and this time I just wanted to show up. In the end, I did have fun, but the lack of sleep started to hit me hard by around 5 p.m. I took the metro back, and instead of catching an auto home like I usually do, I decided to walk. Thought it might help me beat the sleepiness. The road from the junction has restaurants and grocery stores on both sides, very familiar path. At one point, I have to take a turn to the right. There's a chicken shop right there, and next to it is this grocery store called Farm Face. So I'm walking, scrolling through cat reels on my phone, when I catch the exact smell of hens. That nasty, specific smell that always comes from that chicken place. I instinctively look up, and yep, there it is. The cages of chickens out front, and Farm Face right beside them, glowing with its bright signage. I remember staring at the sign for a second, trying to remember if I had to grab anything for home. I was so tempted to get a coffee, but I knew if I gave in, I'd just stay up even longer. I needed a shower and sleep. That was the plan. So I take the turn. A little ahead is a flower shop. I noticed they were unloading a bunch of plants from a truck. That caught my attention because they don't always do that. I made a quick mental note to remind my dad about getting new plants for the house. The smell in that spot is usually like muddy and leaves, earthy, and kinda comforting. I kept walking, still on my phone, and then, out of nowhere, I get the chicken smell again. The flower shop usually smells like wet, cold mud and green stuff, not hens. So I look up. Farm Face. Again. Chickens. Same glowing sign. Same smell. Same spot. My heart dropped. I had already passed this. I know this stretch of road by heart. I didn't turn back. I didn't loop around. I just kept walking straight. And yet, there I was again at the exact same place. I was panicking inside at this point. My heartbeat was loud that I could literally hear it in my ears. I was trying to think of a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. To test if I was losing it, I took the same right turn again. And sure enough, the same flower shop was unloading the same plants from the same truck. Same moment. I have no idea what happened. Maybe I was just too sleep deprived. But I swear on everything, I did not walk back. I didn't turn around. I kept walking straight. Story 5. This one's been gnawing at me for years. Try telling someone a rock disappeared, and they'll look at you like you've got a head full of helium. But rocks don't just vanish, right? Especially not ones the size of a goddamn recreational vehicle. But this one did. I do outdoor events, dance parties, music gatherings, that sort of thing. A friend of mine told me he knew a potential spot for our next big event. A quarry about 100 kilometers out of the city, tucked next to a river. It sounded perfect. Remote, open, good acoustics, and plenty of space for people to lose themselves in the music and stars. So the three of us piled into a car and drove out there one weekend to scope it out. It was everything we hoped for, except for one thing. Dead center in the flattest part of the quarry, right where the main dance floor would have gone, was a boulder. Not just a rock. This thing was massive, bigger than a winterized Winnebago. It sat there like it had always been part of the earth. Ugly, in the way. We all joked about blowing it up or hauling it out with a crane. We'll need dynamite and a small miracle, one of us said. We left it at that, just a pipe dream. For the time being. About a year later, I was desperate. I needed that quarry. Nothing else was working. Either too expensive, too close to neighbors, or just plain boring. So I called the farmer who owned the land. Told him I wanted to rent the quarry. He was all in. Even mentioned he knew someone with a demolition license who might be able to help with the rock. Bingo. We set up a meeting. I arrived a bit early and decided to walk the site again. That's when things got weird. As I stepped into the quarry, I immediately noticed something felt off. The space felt too open, too easy. I scanned the area where the boulder had been, but it was gone. Not moved, not cracked, not reduced to rubble. Gone. I walked around like an idiot, thinking maybe I was just misremembering. Maybe it had been off to the side. But no. I paced back and forth. I checked the ground. There were no blast marks. No tire tracks. No signs of erosion. Nothing. The earth where the rock had sat wasn't even disturbed. No dents. No discoloration. Just an unbroken patch of stone and dirt. When the farmer arrived, I asked him straight up, "Did you already have that huge rock removed?" His face scrunched up like I'd just asked him if he'd seen Bigfoot wrestling a tractor. "What rock?" he said. "The one that was sitting in the middle of the quarry," I replied. "We joked about needing to blow it up." He shook his head slowly. "I've been having barbecues down here for over 15 years with my buddies. There's never been a rock like that in this quarry. Not one that size." I laughed at first. Thought maybe he was messing with me. But his expression never changed. Just confusion sliding into concern. Still not convinced I was losing my mind, I called the friend who'd first brought us there. "Hey, do you remember that rock? The one we wanted to blow up," he finished. "Yeah, of course. That thing was huge." "Why?" I told him it wasn't there anymore. He paused, then said, "Dude, what do you mean it's not there? Did someone move it?" "No," I said. "It's like it never existed." We didn't laugh about it after that. Over time, I've come to one conclusion, and I don't even care how it sounds. It wasn't a rock. It was something else. Something pretending to be a rock. Maybe a cloaked ship. Maybe a surveillance thing. Maybe something with a somebody else's problem field wrapped around it. Whatever it was, it let us see it once. Then decided we didn't need to anymore. Maybe we got too close. Maybe we weren't supposed to come back. But I still think about it every time I drive past a quarry. Sometimes I wonder if it's still there, just waiting to be seen again. Story 6. It was a Sunday. My husband had gone to CVS to grab a couple of caffeinated drinks for us. It's a quick errand. 15 minutes, max. He always backs into the driveway when he returns, and I can usually hear his car before I even see it. While he was out, I decided to take the dog on a quick walk to the cul-de-sac, just 4 houses down, a 5-minute loop we've done 100 times. Easy. Familiar. Harmless. I was on my way back when I heard the sound of a car pulling into our neighborhood. Familiar. That low, distinct rumble of my husband's car. Except it wasn't his car. A white SUV pulled into the driveway of the house next to ours. I did a double take. It was too similar, the same low growl of the engine, the same rhythm of tires on asphalt. But it was the wrong vehicle. Weird, but not impossible. Coincidences happen. I got back to the porch and let the dog off the leash. He's well behaved, and he just likes to sit near the steps and watch the world as it goes by. I started cleaning off the blades of my branch trimmers, busying myself while I waited for my husband to come back, so we could enjoy our drinks in the sun. A few minutes passed. Then I heard it again, his car. This time unmistakable. Same engine note. Same backing in motion up the driveway. I turned and saw the car reversing in like always. The dog perked up and walked to the edge of the porch. That's his usual welcome routine. Waits for my husband to open the door, tail wagging. I heard the engine cut off. I kept cleaning the trimmers, assuming he might be on the phone or just taking a beat before coming inside. But then, time stretched. No door opened. No footsteps. No greeting. The dog sat patiently, waiting, expectant. I finally stood up, a little impatient and more than a little thirsty, and walked over to the car. The driver's seat was empty. No one was in the vehicle. The doors were locked. The engine was off. The windows were up. There was no way he could have slipped past me. The porch is the only route into the house from the driveway, and I had been standing right there. The dog would have gone nuts if someone walked by. He always does. The car had arrived. I had heard it, seen it, but my husband was not in it. I bolted into the house. Maybe somehow he'd gotten inside without me noticing. I found him in the bathroom, door closed. When he came out, I asked him, "Did you just get back?" He gave me a weird look. "No. I saw you walking the dog from the corner when I turned into the neighborhood. I just got home now." I stared at him. "You weren't in the car a few minutes ago." "What?" "No. I just pulled in." I told him what happened. How I'd heard the car, seen it pull in, heard the engine shut off. How the dog had waited for him. How I'd walked up to the car and it was empty. We both stood there in the kitchen, not saying much for a moment. Then he laughed awkwardly and said, "Maybe it was aliens. Or maybe you got abducted and dropped back off in a slightly different timeline." We laughed. Kind of. But it didn't feel like a joke. Because the dog had waited. That's the part that stuck with me. I could have questioned my own memory, my own perception. But the dog heard the car. Saw it back in. Reacted to it. And dogs don't hallucinate. So what pulled into our driveway before he actually got home? And more importantly, who, or what, was supposed to be in that car? Story 7. So a little about me. I want to maintain anonymity, so I'll just say, I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. I don't want to say which casino I was in, and there is a reason for that. This is the second time I had a glitch happen while this particular dealer was dealing. So for that reason, if that dealer somehow has power that he will not be aware I noticed. I'm holding JQ. The flop is 10109. Because I am open-ended, I'm hopeful to improve to the straight. So the turn comes out and it's a 7. Great. We both check, the river is a 9. I now have 2 pairs with a Q high kicker. He tables pocket aces for aces and 10s, and I table my hand, I got nothing, I missed, I say, and flash my JQ. Without missing a beat, one of the players says, "You have a straight." And I am certain that I missed because I was watching the card. I glance back at the board, and the river is in fact an 8. I enjoy poker, and I know what I saw. The card changed. Nobody seemed to realize, everybody. I double-checked my hand before my action, and checked on the river in front. I missed. It changed, not while I was looking at it, but when I looked back, it had literally changed. Do you think there are people out there with some kind of power? Is it coincidence? I was not drunk or high. The first time I noticed the same dealer glitch is when 2 players were all in a tournament. A player made a straight, and everyone saw it and commented on it. But by the river, one of the player's whole cards shifted a value down, destroying the straight. This seems to happen when people's eyes move away from the cards in question. Even the dealer thought the player made a straight before double-checking. That time, I was influenced by alcohol or marijuana, so I chalked it up to just being high and not seeing the card right. But this time I was completely sober. I did not win the tournament. I did, however, win an unnatural amount of hands in the 30 minutes this dealer was on the table. Have you ever experienced playing cards changing their value after being dealt face-up? Story 8. Hi, so this is really weird. My husband and I live in Georgia in the US, and today around 12:30 p.m., we were parked outside of a subway, and for a second the world outside went pitch black. It was like the power went out for a second and turned back on, but it was all of outside in the middle of the day. I noticed it, and I looked at my husband who noticed it too, but he thought he was just blinking. But it was the middle of the day, and there were no planes in the sky or anything. There's nothing that I can think of that would cause this to happen. After it happened, I went on Google to try and find a scientific explanation for this, but I couldn't. Instead, I was brought here, and I found a lot of posts from other people about this happening from a few years ago. I haven't seen anything recent, so I'm wondering if anyone else experienced this today or recently. This has never happened to us before in our entire lives, and no one around us seemed to be acting different afterwards, so I'm not sure if people in our area noticed anything. I called my mom and cousin to see if they noticed anything, but they didn't, so I'm at a loss, and I don't know what to think or how to make sense of it. Could it have been a meteor or an eclipse that covered the sun briefly? Thanks. Story 9. This happened last year, but it still messes with my head. I was in the hospital after a routine surgery, nothing crazy, just getting my gallbladder removed. Everything was supposed to be smooth. I woke up in recovery feeling okay, but about an hour later, I suddenly felt really cold, dizzy, and like my heart was beating out of my chest. I told the nurse something felt wrong, and that's the last thing I remember from inside my body. What I remember next was watching the whole thing happen, like I was standing in the corner of the room. I could see myself lying on the bed, pale as hell, a bunch of nurses rushing in, alarms going off. One of them was doing chest compressions. Another was calling for a crash cart. I remember thinking, holy shit, I'm dying. But I didn't feel panic. I felt weirdly calm, detached, like it wasn't really me down there, just a shell. I could hear them shouting numbers, shouting my name, and even yelling something like, "We're losing him." But I just watched. I even looked down at my arms and realized I didn't have arms, not physical ones. I was just this floating awareness, kind of like being in a dream, except more vivid than anything I've ever experienced. And then it got even weirder. I felt this pull, not like someone was grabbing me, but more like gravity started working in a different direction. Like I was about to be sucked upward, somewhere. I don't know where. And right before it happened, I heard this voice in my head, totally calm, just say, "Not yet." Next thing I knew, I jolted awake with a mask on my face, gasping like I'd been underwater. My chest hurt like hell from the compressions. Turns out I flatlined for almost 2 minutes. Heart completely stopped. But somehow I came back. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, not at first. But I'll say this, I was more alive during those 2 minutes than I've ever felt in my whole life. And whatever I was, wherever I was floating, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't a dream. I know what I saw. Story 10. We exchanged the usual "text me when you get home" farewells, and just before I walked out, she handed me her spare key. I took it. I remember this clearly, and stuffed it into my right jeans pocket. Not just some vague flicker of memory. No, I felt the key's weight. I even patted my leg afterward, out of habit. The cold shape of the metal pressing against the fabric. It was there, or so I thought. I grabbed the rest of my things and headed for the front door. I hadn't even made it down the stairs when I reached into my pocket to fish the key out. Gone. Just like that. I froze mid-step. My hand slid deeper into the pocket. Still nothing. I turned the pocket inside out. Empty. I patted my legs down, thinking maybe I'd missed it. Then I took the pants off completely. I retraced every step I'd taken through the room. Nothing. Not on the floor. Not under the bed. Not in the folds of the comforter. Not near the nightstand. So I did what any rational person would do when reality stops making sense. I woke her up. She was groggy but helpful. We tore the room apart together. She asked where I'd put it, I told her. Right pocket. She double-checked every pocket herself. Turned them inside out again. She even smoothed the denim flat, like she was trying to iron out a ghost hiding inside the seams. Still no key. We combed the room for nearly 20 minutes. Under the bed. In the sheets. Behind the dresser. At one point, I checked the same drawer 3 times because I didn't trust my own mind anymore. Nothing. I felt like I was losing it. Like I was living in a version of the world that had slightly different physics than the one I woke up in. And then just as I was about to give up, just as I was about to launch into a full-fledged, I swear I'm not crazy panic spiral, I felt it. That unmistakable pressure in my right pocket. I froze. My hand hovered above it, afraid to touch, like the key might vanish again if I acknowledged it. I pressed down. It was there. I reached in, slowly, like I was fishing a live wire out of a puddle, and pulled it out. Her key. The exact one. Same shape. Same feel. We both stared at it, dumbfounded. We had searched that pocket at least a dozen times. There was no way in hell it was there the entire time. It hadn't fallen. It hadn't been dropped. It hadn't been tucked into the waistband or caught in the lining. It had disappeared. Then it reappeared. We didn't speak for a few seconds. Just stood there with the key between us, like it was radioactive. A tiny mundane object now carrying the weight of something deeply, cosmically wrong. But that wasn't the only time her room played with reality. Once, while we were just lying in bed talking, a glass sitting on the nightstand shattered. Out of nowhere. No knock. No touch. No movement. Just crack, like it had had enough of this dimension and decided to leave. We joked, nervously, that maybe her room was some kind of portal. A weak spot in the fabric of space where things momentarily slipped through the seams. But I still don't have a better explanation. All I know is this: I put that key in my pocket, and for 20 minutes, it simply did not exist. Story 11. I work as a restaurant manager. At our establishment, even salary employees have to clock in to record our time. Managers are expected to work 50 hours per week, however that fits is acceptable. Today I came in an hour earlier than scheduled, so I could leave an hour earlier since we were light on covers. Closer to the end of the evening, 8:35 to be exact, I decided to check my time clock to see how much longer I had to stay there on a slow night. I had about an hour and a half left, so right around 10 p.m. I could leave. I got busy with several tasks, running drinks, talking to tables, helping servers with various things, and setting up for brunch service tomorrow. When I decided to check the time again, thinking it would surely be time to head home, my Apple Watch said 8:35. I just stood there for a minute trying to figure out what the hell happened, and decided I couldn't possibly be going crazy. I checked my phone, and it said 8:36. I was absolutely floored. How could no time have passed while I did an hour of work? I thought maybe my dumbass just read my watch wrong, but no. I distinctly recall having a conversation with a server the first time it was 8:35, and how we had seated our last reservation. I even asked them about it, and they couldn't remember. Has this happened to anyone else? Story 12. I walk my daughter from our house to her school 4 blocks away, almost every morning, while my wife is getting ready to leave for work. I work from home, and often cross paths with my wife as I am walking back home, and she is driving to work. We always do a little wave and blow kisses if we see each other. Last Tuesday started completely normally. While I was walking back home after dropping off my daughter at school, I saw my wife, including her purple hair and black work scrubs, driving to work in her car, a gold 2012 Toyota Corolla with a license plate frame of our favorite sports team. So I waved goodbye to her, and she waved back and blew me a kiss goodbye. Then I get back home, and I'm surprised to find her car was still in the garage, and she was still upstairs in our room, getting ready for work. I was understandably freaked out, and I told her what I just experienced. She confirmed that she obviously hadn't left yet that morning. The next day we did our usual routine, and I saw her driving off, and she and her car were gone from the house as expected. During lunch, I texted her to confirm that we saw each other on her way to work, and she confirmed that it was her, and she did see me on Wednesday, but not Tuesday.